Hey guys, Bowie here, and this is all you need to know about the new patch 707. Before we start, I'll give you a disclaimer. This video is all about the new patch with the exception of the map changes and the new heroes. As you guys knew, I was casting Asus ROG, I lost my flight, and I couldn't actually play the new patch at all. And here I am back in Brazil and making videos for you guys. So there will be specific videos about those topics as soon as possible, but what's this patch about? In my opinion, this patch is all about rounding. Mid lane is not the only lane that matters anymore, safe lane is not garbage, but not at the cost of offlane being unplayable again, since a lot of new ways for offlaners getting experience have been introduced, like bigger experience acquisition range, as well as neutrals not denying experience anymore, which means that they can get into a safe distance and, get a little bit of experience from those support poles. Without the extra creep in the mid lane, and with the changes to how denies work, let's compare the new patch to the old one. A lot of people might feel like denying the range creep is not as good as it was last patch, since they reduce the experience it gives, but they also reduce how much experience the enemy gets when you get a deny. In the scenario where you get one range deny and the enemy doesn't get any denies, let's see how much experience is distributed now in comparison to before. Okay, so this is some NA math right here. As you can see, in the new patch you're getting 37% more experience than your opponent when you get a range creep deny in comparison to them, whereas in the old patch they would get a 30% experience advantage. So even though now the range creep gives less experience and we have less creeps in the mid lane, denying the range creep and avoiding the enemy range creep being denied is even more valuable than before. Don't get tricked with the numbers. The range creep giving less experience might dissuade you to Midas him, but in general, denying him is even more important than it was last patch. Another big change from last patch to this one is the golden experience in each wave. First of all, every lane now pretty much gives the same amount of experience the old mid lane used to give, so that's pretty big. I mean, a lot of heroes are now going to get online faster than they used to, and I feel like the power spike from level 1 to level 2 is going to be even more important in getting kills and just making that early game very chaotic. In regards to gold, if you get all last hits, you're getting extra 500 gold every 10 minutes in comparison to the old patch, which can be massive. A lot of the old late game carriers seem to struggle quite a bit in the last patch because they didn't get online soon enough. Is this extra gold enough for them to come back into the meta? At the same time though, with not a lot of nerfs in the likes of Bloodseeker, Monkey King, aren't these very dominant heroes even more suitable to win the early game and just make use of that extra farm to crush the game even faster than before? I mean, time will tell. Another big change is the experience needed to get to level 1, that went from 240 to 200. That comes tied with a big reduction in how much experience you give when you die in the early levels. If you pay attention to the changes, you now can't TP at minute 0 to ward like you used to, which in my opinion will shift how the game works early on. Usually trying to fight for bounties was never a good idea because not only first blood gold is way more valuable than what you yield from the rune, but also because how much experience you're giving away. Now with the TP ready, even if you die, you'll be able to reach your lane, and also you're not giving that much in terms of experience, while also being able to deny the bounty against opponents that have greedy picks. That gets amplified by the new rune positions that enable more aggression than before. With the pseudo incentive to late game corners and greedy heroes, can these new changes that propel to fight early on balance out the game? I have no idea. Another change worth mentioning is the complete and utter death of junglers. Not only the creep starts spawning 30 seconds later than before, Iron Talon exists no more. Since the creeps take so long to spawn, warding camps to block them super early like before wastes a huge chunk of ward duration, and this is why I feel like we'll see more early engagements than we're used to see. Another big implication of that is that you can't stack Poe at minute 1 and only minute 2, which is a lot of experience that the offlaner might be able to get if you can't really zone him at level 1. But going back to the early engagements, I feel like there's gonna be clashes because before you had pretty much no chance of dying if you TP'd at minute 0 with smoke and just warded. And now I feel like groups of heroes will have to walk towards the enemy side of the map to drop those wards, and if your team's kinda bad at level 1, you can be punished. Another thing to mention is sieging. Pretty much every building was buffed back to the old armor values, but this does not mean that sieging is harder than last patch. What happened is that they changed the way the armor formula works, but the tower's damage reduction is still the same. In fact, I would say that sieging is actually easier than before. Not only shrines don't exist in the base anymore, you start getting double catapults at 30 minutes instead of 40. This is a huge change. One thing worth mentioning also is that some heroes siege without resorting to armor. The likes of Pugna and Jakiro were not nerfed at all, and these armor changes do not affect them. One of the new items also give chance to deal damage to towers without physical damage, which shows a bold step in terms of balance coming from the frog. I'm curious to see how the professional environment adapts. Another big change regarding sieges is tier 4s not having HP regen anymore. We saw a lot of mega creep games recently and even comebacks, and in my opinion the fact that those towers could regen was one of the biggest reasons those comebacks even happened. I honestly liked it as a viewer sure, but I can see why the change was made, and the only compromise the Frog took is giving the Ancient faster HP regen than before. Talking about Roshan now. Not only Roshan gives you a freaking Refresher Orb in the third Roshan and forward, that Refresher Orb does not cost any freaking mana. I'm more than certain that this item will have a mana cost or a drawback, but this goes to show how late game cores are not gods in this patch. High ground defense is now harder since the shrines do not exist anymore. On top of that, the shrines that do exist don't scale with time, making late game Roshan fights harder for the losing team. When you combine that with the fact that the double catapult wave now starts at 30 minutes instead of 40, you can see that while there's more potential to play late game heroes, there's also big incentives to finish the game even earlier. How that will impact the game, only time can tell. There are no attack modifiers or orbs in Dota anymore. Get your Maelstrom on OD, Skadi on Husker, have fun. Also, lifesteal now sums, which means that lifesteal talents and Satanic fully add to each other. I have no idea how big of a deal that is, but Satanic was buffed again and is probably worth testing. Another change worth mentioning in my opinion is the new regen rune. Froggy is smart though, so he made sure to up the magic resistance aura slightly on the jungle creeps. Another big change is the cast point buffs on pretty much every neutral. A direct buff to the likes of Enchantress, Chen, and Helm of the Dominator. These heroes were already doing quite well last patch, and the changes probably increase how likely we'll see them in the competitive scene. Doom also gets buffed by most of those changes since he uses pretty much all of those abilities as well. When we were talking supports, while the cost of Observer Wards, Ground Courier, and Smoke were increased, you're pretty much getting 2 extra tangles every time you buy a set, which means that helping your mid with them is less of a burden than it was before. You also don't pay to upgrade a courier. With Mango now being one of the components to build Magic Wand, I can see one of the supports starting with a build like Mango, 2 branches, Tangles, Clarity, and Courier. The fact that you carry that Mango around, paired with people having to walk towards the enemy side of the map to ward, gives the game a lot of different dynamics as well. Warding as a group is more necessary since you don't have the privilege of getting the enemy side of the map before everyone else, maybe forcing more engagements than we used to see, and that Mango really ramps up the aggression of everyone. High move speed heroes are definitely more efficient in warding early on, and with boots being worse than before and support items being more expensive, which means they can't really afford boots that early, we could probably see high move speed heroes getting better win rates. Another big change in the game is the deal bonuses related to stats. In addition to damage, every attribute gives a unique stat to heroes of the type. Strength heroes get status resistance, which is the ability to reduce the duration of stuff like roots, silence, stuns, disarms. If you have 100 strength, you'll be able to reduce the duration of these debuffs by 15%. Agility heroes now get 6% move speed for each 100 agility, meaning a hero with 400 move speed will now have 424 move speed. In my opinion, Intelligence got the bad end of the trade, only receiving 15% magic resistance every 100 Intelligence. You have to remember though that a lot of the new items benefit Intelligence heroes, so maybe that's one of the reasons you only get a Cloak by having so much Intelligence. And since I mentioned Cloak, let's start talking about worth to mention item changes. A lot of items lost free damage, Wraith Band, Bracer, and Talisman, and most of the items that are built with them lost all the bonus damage. Perseverance and thus Lincoln Sphere as well as Lotus Orb and Refresher don't have their damage components either. Kaya is one of the new items and it's supposed to be the intelligence version of Senjanyasha. While the item is being hyped, I don't feel like this item is that great. 10% spell amplification is great, but the item doesn't really build into anything later on, and also the mana loss part of the item is very situational. In my opinion, this is great on spellcasters that face mana problems or are not intelligence heroes, like Ember Spirit, or even maybe some sort of core ogre, or maybe even Bristleback, I don't know. Nullifier is also another item with a lot of hype surrounding it. The build-up is quite greedy, but at the same time it's a good item against heroes that rely on BKB or Manta to be survivable. You have to remember though that the cast range is pretty short and there is a projectile which is probably very easy to dodge. Many people see it as an Orchid substitute, but in my opinion the item is more of an unreliable version of an hybrid between Side of Vice and Orchid. Unreliable because it can be dodged, And I mentioned Side of Eyes because once you actually use Side of Eyes now, there's really no way that that hero alone can get free of Side of Eyes. And since Nullifier actually moods that hero, you know, that's pretty much the same concept, and you're kinda slow in Side of Eyes, you know, that's what I meant. Spirit Vessel is one of my favorite items for this patch. People have been complaining for a long time for an item that deals with healing, since there's pretty much only Ancient Apparition to counter those types of heroes. The build-up is amazing, the stats are great for pretty much every support hero in the game. It can be used defensively and offensively, but the biggest use for the item, in my opinion, is definitely against the likes of Huskar, Oracle, Necro, Pugna, Alchemist. Aeon Disc is a very weird item. It's very expensive, but at the same time it gives 25% status resistance and also a passive get out of the jail type of ability that makes you invulnerable for 2.5 seconds and also gives you a strong dispel. The problem though is that if you take any damage, be it Roshan, creeps, when you're below 80%, the trigger will occur and you will lose this for 100 seconds. I feel like the item has potential, but it will take a while until teams experiment with it. When you have initiators like Enigma, Tide, Phoenix in your team, the ability to guarantee that they will pop their ultimates before dying can make or break late game fights, and if you add a strong dispel on top of a 2.5 second immortal state, I can see well coordinating teams making the item look OP as hell. Meteor Hammer. In Dota, you always had the chance to itemize towards a lot of things. As an intelligence hero though, dealing with sieging was always a problem, and that's where the item comes in. At least in my opinion, you can say that the item is decent to teamfights, but it is at best situational in some heroes. The channel time is very long and thus unreliable to most heroes in teamfights, but I do feel like this is a great item on int cores that like pushing. The item is cheaper than Necronomicon level 1 and can probably push better, since after the buff is applied in buildings there's nothing to be done about it. The stats are decent, the build up is okay, and I feel like we'll see more of this item than any other new item at the start of the patch. There are some extra mentions to be made about items. Even though Urn got an upgrade, it now only deals magic damage, making it slightly worse against Huskar for instance. Another balanced nerf is the fact that PMS doesn't exist anymore. One of the weirdest changes in my opinion, especially considering Ice Frog's crazy obsession with mangoes, is the new Soul Ring. It's not used to build Bloodstone anymore, which to me is a huge nerf to an item that no one even tried to build in most heroes. Soul Ring build up is fine now, the extra HP kinda synergizes with the HP you lose using it, but it feels wonky to me. With Meteor Hammer being added, the change to pipe working on builds is funny because I actually theory craft about it. I'm also fine if Necronomicon doesn't give any intelligence anymore. A lot of people underrate how big of a deal Mana Regen is, and most heroes that build Necro in the past care more about Mana Regen than intelligence itself. The final topic of this video is evasion. Everyone's talking about Bash being a counter to evasion and the new MKB. I feel like this is a push to a good direction. True Strike, as a PA player, was way too strong as a counter to evasion, and the new system seems better. MKB is cheaper, but it doesn't counter evasion that well anymore.